Thinking about leaving your soul-sucking 9 to 5 job, one of the biggest struggles I see people, especially as women, face is the idea of having that safety net, that enticing perks and benefits, and listening to that head trash of what will people think if I leave. I totally get it, and I've been where you are. That's why I created a free guide to help you if you're thinking about putting in that notice. It's called Unlocking Your Exit Plan. Discover 5 things you need to do before leaving your 9 to 5. This guide is filled with worksheets and steps so you will have hand holding along the way. You can download your copy in the link in the show notes, and again, it's totally free. Now back to today's episode. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Hello C.S. Dorsey podcast. I have Samantha today on my podcast. Hi, Samantha. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Awesome. I'm doing well. So, could you tell everyone who you are and what you do?
Of course. My name's Samantha Bradshaw. I'm the founding attorney of InLine Legal. It's a virtual law firm dedicated to keeping creatives out of the courtroom and in the studio. We do that with proactive legal counsel, a lot of education for first-time entrepreneurs. And that's actually who we love working with, is those first-generation entrepreneurs who don't have their dad's, boss's, uncle's lawyer to call. I don't know about you, but I didn't grow up that way.
Oh my goodness, I love it. What was it again? Dad, bosses, uncle, cousin.
Look, it's some like third degree of separation. It's I didn't know any lawyers growing up. Did you?
No.
Okay. So I like working with the folks who didn't because it's a lot more rewarding. They're making big changes in their lives and their communities' lives. And it's so much more satisfying for me as a business owner to work with those kinds of people instead.
Awesome. That sounds really good. So let's talk about the
Yeah.
inspiration behind you starting your business. What was that like for you?
Oh, the inspiration behind it. I think like a lot of your listeners, right? I ran into a bunch of circumstances that I didn't like and thought there absolutely had to be a better way. I think it started really, I have a very dear friend who wanted to open a board game cafe in Lebanon, where I was living at the time. I lived there for 5 years. And at the firm that I was working at when I was there, they were encouraging us to bring in clients. So I brought in my friend, and the way that he approached board games was he wanted to use it as a way to help people develop emotional empathy in a country that, for a million reasons, probably has a very high rate of PTSD. And board games are a great way to force people to lose gracefully, communicate, deal with confrontation in a healthy way. And I thought it was wonderful what he was trying to do. So I brought him to my boss, the managing partner, and was like, hey, I have this guy. He wants to be a client. And in Lebanon, they actually have a law that every small business has to have a lawyer on retainer. Every small business, every business, which I think is brilliant if you get a decent lawyer, because it can keep you out of a lot of trouble. And the bureaucracy in Lebanon's quite high. But so I brought my friend over to the office, sat down, had an appointment with the managing partner. Everything went well. He explained the story of the board game cafe. It was beautiful. My boss ate it up. He loved it. And at the end of it, yeah, my boss was like, those kind of basic things that he was asking for, those will cost $14,000. And I was just like, this will take one of our interns 2 hours. What? And I'm being a little bit of an exaggerator here, but point was, he was just starting up. He needed his funds to be able to go get stock of board games, to look at locations, to bring on help. He didn't need to dump it all into legal right away, even though he needed the foundations. So he walked away. My law firm didn't get a client, and my friend didn't get me as a lawyer, which really bummed me out. And so when the man who became my husband drug my butt to New York, I decided I did not want to take another bar exam. And so the answer to both of those problems was I'll open my own law firm and I'm going to help people like my friend with the board game cafe.
As soon as we said $14,000, I was like, my mouth
Uh,
dropped.
everybody did, right? Everyone's like, oh dear God, I can't. Who has that? Like, we're not talking about startups with venture capital money, right? We're talking about real people trying to do something that they enjoy, that they're passionate about.
Can you remember a time in your business or starting out where you had like a hello moment?
I'm sure there's been a million of them. Like, I've been in legal for the better part of over 15 years now. I've been running this firm for 4 years. There's been a bunch of them, but I think kind of pre-law firm, one of my favorite stories, but least favorite experiences was I was in the juvenile criminal court outside of Richmond, back when I still, worked in this kind of stuff and had people's lives in my hands instead of just their money. I much prefer to have your money in my hands, guys, not your lives. I don't want it. I don't want that stress. Stay out of trouble. So I walked in, it was the middle of July. And if you've ever been to Central Virginia in the middle of July, you know it is absolutely humid as all can get out. And I walked in, I look very nice. I'm in a skirt suit, all looks very pressed, pretty, all the things. And the judge looks down at me and he's like, "Ma'am, you're not allowed in my courtroom without pantyhose."
No.
I'm like, "Sir, you're not wearing pantyhose." Um, and I think that was kind of my first experience of, if you don't like the system that you're in, throw the table over, start making a new one.
I love it. I love that. Just that one thing you like, you know what? Here's the
One
thing.
line.
Mm-mm.
Sir, it is July and it is humid. Are you kidding me?
Oh my.
Pantyhose. Pantyhose.
Oh my goodness. So I'm just curious, is
Mm.
that just per that one courtroom, just with that one judge, or is it like standard? Like, probably not, huh?
I won't say it's standard,
Okay.
but it's certainly not so rare. That judge in particular got into some trouble later on, which kind of lined up with his comments quite well.
So let's talk about why good customer service start with a contract.
The way that I look at customer service when you're running your own business, when you're trying to create this amazing guest experience, this amazing client experience, this amazing customer experience, whatever it is that you call them, whether you're in service based or product based or event based, right? The point of it is you want the people that hired you to have an absolutely amazing time engaging with whatever it is that you sell. Think about the best vacation you've ever had in your life. Absolute best vacation. Do you know what that was for you?
Yeah, it was Hawaii.
Hawaii. Okay.
Hmm.
All right. So when you got to the airport, did you know what to expect?
Not really, because it's been a long time.
But when you got to the airport, you knew you had to go to a check-in counter. You
Yes.
knew you had to go through security. You
Yes.
knew the number of the plane that was going to take you to Hawaii through God knows how many stops and delays it took to get there. But
Yes.
you knew all of these things before you ever stepped foot in that airport,
That's true.
right?
That's true.
And on your worst vacation, you walk up and you're like, "Oh God, I have no idea what's going on. I don't even know how we're going to get there." And it's all a bit of a nightmare. Your customer's in the exact same situation. They have no idea how they're working with you, what they're buying from you, how to engage with you when they first show up. They might have some idea of what they think it will be, but they have no actual understanding. They haven't done it before. They haven't gone to the check-in counter. They haven't walked through security. They haven't gotten on the plane and listened to some flight attendant make terrible jokes about how you have to put your oxygen mask on before anybody else, right?
Right.
Contracts are the description of all of those ground rules, and it's how you enforce them. It's how you initially communicate them. It's how you make sure that your client, your customer, your person knows how the relationship with you is going to go. So there was a study done a couple of years ago. There's always every couple of years there's a different version of this, but there was one in particular that they grabbed a bunch of college students out of some country in Northern Europe and they asked them to read all of the terms and conditions of every piece of software they use on a weekly basis that was on their phone. How many apps do you open on your phone on a weekly basis?
A lot.
Right. Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, Twitter, YouTube, Apple, everything, right? Amazon, Zoom, TikTok, Netflix, Microsoft, Uber, Lyft, Uber Eats, DoorDash, whatever you want to go with, right? Tinder, if you're, on that moment still. Um, that's a lot of apps. And you'll notice every time you update, they normally have a change of terms and conditions. And it's pretty often, right? It's every couple months. So they asked these college kids to that they had to read all of the terms and conditions of every app they used before they could use it. It was impossible. It was utterly impossible. If you assume the average person reads at like 240 words a minute, just reading the ones that I listed would take you somewhere between 6 and 7 hours. And
Mm-hmm.
240 words a minute is pretty fast.
Yeah, it is.
Like you're already top there. And that's not even taken into account every time they change them and how difficult it is to understand legal language sometimes. And you have to do it all over again every time there's an update to those new terms and conditions. All of that to say, you're not reading the contracts of the service providers that you use. Your clients aren't either. That means you have to find other ways to communicate the ground rules that you've laid in your contracts to your clients. And that means talking about what your refund process looks like before they buy. That means talking about what happens if they miss an appointment, how you reschedule that kind of stuff before they buy. That means having onboarding materials that walk them through these things so they can't say, oh, I didn't know. And you're like, well, it's in the contract. And they're like, yeah, okay. Who read that? Nobody.
I'm a service provider as well. So every so often I get a client here and there. And it's so funny because I try to make my contract as clear as possible because I know, just like what you said, that is so true. Like, how often do they actually read it, or are they actually
Mm-hmm.
reading everything? I have yet to have one client that actually said, oh, Candace, I seen in your contract that you're only working so many, only work these hours. Or I
Uh-huh.
actually mentioned that, though,
Oh,
on the
sure.
call. I mentioned that on the call, but they don't say like, oh, I didn't know I was going to get charged a $25 or 25%, fee if I'm
Right.
late. Or
Right.
they don't ask those questions. They just sign it. Like,
Yeah.
majority of the questions that they want to know, they tend to do like a follow-up type of question after the discovery call
Yeah.
before
And
they
that's
sign. Mm-hmm.
and that's why your onboarding communication, your onboarding nurture sequence is so important.
Mm-hmm.
With our retainer clients, we go through their contracts and their onboarding nurture sequence and make sure they line up. Because then there is this look, we have average attention spans of 8 seconds these days. They keep getting shorter every couple of years. They're not going to read through your 10-page contract. And you're lucky if it's 10 pages. And most of the time they're more. They're not. They're also not going to read your 3-page email, but they will glance at a headline if it's in a pretty color of the one part of it that you need them to know at that exact moment. I mean, and all of that comes from really understanding your contract and understanding the rules that you put around this game anyway. That's going back to my board game cafe. I'm an avid board game player, tabletop games. Started on Dungeons and Dragons recently, PC games, the whole thing. But the point of the contract is it's the rule book of the game. And if you don't write the rule book, everyone's really confused. But there's a game, quite a funny name actually. It's called Exploding Kittens. And the gentleman who created it talks quite regularly about the fact that he fights with his legal team fairly often, because you can imagine with a game named Exploding Kittens, legal team was a little concerned about what disclaimers they needed to put in there of, no kittens were harmed in the making of this card game kind of stuff.
Right.
But when he's making the rule book that comes with the game, legal apparently drops in all sorts of things that he's like, nobody's going to read this. It's not going to happen. Why are you doing this to me? So his solution is fine, legal. You can have the rule book, the physical printed out copy that comes with the card game. I want a QR code or a link to a video where we explain the game on video in less than 3 minutes. Because they're not going to read the rule book, because they're not going to read the contract, right? You have to have these foundations in place, because when somebody starts playing that game and something breaks or they run into a weird situation, they are going to go open the rule book. They are going to go read your contract and go figure out, what applies in this moment? What rules tell us what to do in this situation? They're not going to look at it the first time. They're going to go watch the video on YouTube telling them how Exploding Kittens works.
I definitely watch a lot of videos on YouTube on how to. And I'm sure it's like dozens of us do that all the time. Just the
Of
littlest
course.
things. Like how to
Yeah.
walk, let me search that.
Look, how many weird little like household hacks or computer hacks or weird tips for Google Sheets or something have you learned off of TikTok this month in these
Yes.
little 30-second clips, right? It is possible to communicate the rules around how it looks like to work with you in a way that is more friendly to the person who needs to be aware of them.
That's a really good idea. Good point as far as like having like some sort of like quick clip or quick video to add into your onboarding process.
It makes sense for your customers, right?
Mhm.
That's video or audio or a series of emails if you're working with them for a long time. Maybe that's easier, right? Just it's when you think about what it is that you're selling, how long your relationship is with that individual based on what you're selling, right? Because it's very different whether you're selling a phone case or a 6-month coaching program. Wildly different relationship.
Yeah.
But that also means the extent that you need to inform people of the rules that are going to govern your relationship, your board game, if you will, need to be adjusted depending on that, right? Maybe it's
Right.
something very quick. Maybe it's something very snappy, very simple. Maybe it's something a little more hand holding, caring, bringing them along on the journey with you kind of thing. And only you, as the business owner, can know what kind of experience suits your product and your customers.
I'm happy that you're bringing the gold nuggets. This is very insightful.
I'm
So,
happy to.
yes. So, is there any last minute advice you have for our listeners out there?
I got one more thing, and just I'm gonna drop this really really fast. Like before you open your business, before you name your product, your program, your service, I beg of you, please make sure that the name that you've selected, that you've spent so many hours fretting over, because right, we were like, oh, we have to get it right, we have to get it perfect, we have to get the right brand. Okay, cool. I can't help you with that. I'm not in marketing. What I can tell you is once you have selected that name, please go to the uspto.gov website and at least do a TESS search for your name. Make sure nobody else has already registered it, because the last thing you want to do is start off your business and a couple months in, once you finally start getting traction, is to get I call them nasty lawyer letters, a cease and desist from some other company that says, "Oh, we already have that name. We get to get all of your profits now, and you have to change the name immediately. So until you do, shut down everything you have on the internet and in print using that name." Okay, thanks. Bye.
Yeah, maybe I use my own name, but maybe I better go ahead and search and see if it's out there.
I mean, so most of the time when you're using your own name, you're in a better position than if you're using terms like words that strictly describe what it is that you're selling.
Got it.
But I will say, if you're using your own name, it very much restricts your ability to scale your business. Because think of all the big brands that you buy stuff from, any of them, right?
Hmm.
They're generally, unless they're 100-year-old companies, they're not names. They're not last names, right? They're not first names. They're not Samantha Bradshaw's law firm, right? They're Apple selling phones, right? Like, in what sense does that? We connect them so clearly now in our heads, but like, it's an apple. I eat an apple. I don't eat a phone. How did they put these two together? That's very strange. I'm sure there's a story behind it. But the point is, when you create names like that, not necessarily that they have to be so distinctly separate, but the more separate they are, the easier it is to get a trademark. But when you create these things that are beyond your name, you're creating a brand that can go beyond you.
I like. Okay.
Which, if you're perfectly fine of like, look, I got my little thing, I'm working my 20 hours a week, life is good, money is fine, I have no desire to ever do anything more than this. Great, you do you, right? That's perfectly fine. But if you're looking at all these gurus online of hit 500,000, hit 1 million, hit 8 figures, right? You got to start thinking like they do. You got to start thinking like the big dogs. So start thinking beyond yourself and start thinking for the brand.
I love this. Yeah. Because I definitely do see like especially those online like online business owner course creators, that
Mm-hmm.
teaches certain things. I do notice that a lot of them do have like that TM or, the trademark.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of their either courses or whatever they have, products, whatever they have, do have a trademark name like right next to it,
Yep.
like the TM. So I do
Yep.
see that a lot. And I'm like, oh, interesting. It like I think I heard one
Yep.
of them say you better hurry up and grab it before somebody take it or something like that.
Yep. Yep. That's look, it's funny. Look, if you come up with a name that's so epic or you're so well known, you're making so much money that people would want to copy you, having that trade, even the TM doesn't mean it's actually registered. It just means they're like saying it's out there that they might have put in an application, but they're at least they're putting their stick in the sand, right? They're claiming
Mm-hmm.
this one. Um, but like the bigger you get, the more likely it is that people are going to copy you, and the easier, the more sense it makes to have something like a trademark that you can use to shut them down if somebody does copy the name, or having copyright registrations if somebody does copy the content, right? If you have the paperwork from the government that you can slam down in front of somebody, you're the one that gets to send a nasty lawyer letter instead of receiving it.
So my question is, and I probably need to take this off the podcast. I kid you not, I might have to edit it.
Let's hear it.
So my question is, so I have all the books that I've written beforehand, they're already automatically copyrighted. I mean, for copywriting purposes, I always think of just like books or something that I've written or something like that. I never think of copywriting as far as like maybe a course that I created or anything like that. So, what are your thoughts in terms of that? And does that even make any sense?
All right. So far, I think you're good on leaving this on the podcast, and I think it'll be helpful.
Okay.
I think you're still great. Look, I'm gonna start off with this. Intellectual property law has three aspects: patent, which is basically for inventions, and I'm oversimplifying, but to make it easy, patent is for inventions, trademark is for brands, right? Identifiers, something that makes you go, oh, that's definitely from that company. Copyright is for content, something that you have created and put into another form that somebody else can consume. It's no longer in your head. It's on paper, it's on a digital file, it's on a recording, it's a video, whatever the case may be. All three of these things grant you different protections as the person who created it. In the US, for trademark, we are a first to use country, which basically means the first person to use that brand theoretically has the first rights to it. We get into some complications when somebody is using it and somebody else applies with the US Patent and Trademark Office for, like before the person using it applies, but that's a longer discussion. You only get the right, according to trademark law, to like shut people down from that name once it's actually registered as a trademark, not the application, not just using it. You can fight it out, but you're gonna like fight it out in the courtroom. It's gonna get messy. Having the actual registration when you get to use the R, the little R in the circle that comes after names, that's when you're good and like locked down, ready to go. Okay. Copyright, on the other hand, the second you take your idea out of your head and put it into the form that somebody else can consume, right? The podcast, the course, the digital workbook, the book, the song, the whatever, you already have copyright ownership in that thing. But
Mhm.
enforcing it requires the registration. You can register things through the Copyright Office the same way as you can apply for a trademark at the Patent and Trademark Office. With courses, they let you like batch upload the video, so you don't have to pay for like each video, because that would be ridiculous. And there's essentially I think right now it's a 90-day window of if I created this within the last 90 days, they'll let me register it. And if anybody tried to copy it before then I'm good. I get first dibs. But if I wait longer than 90 days, then it becomes a matter of like, oh, well, who created it first? Can we prove you copied it? And you're going to fight out in court, and it's going to cost you more money than you're even ever going to make coming back from it. So it's not worth it.
Okay.
Fortunately, something that's fun is there was a law that came out, I think it was about a year and a half ago. Let's see if I can pull up the exact date. That's why you're hearing typing as I go. Let me see. Where is the date? Well, yeah, whatever. Let's go with a year and a half ago as of date of this recording. But essentially, there is a law that created the Copyright Claims Board. It is essentially a small claims court for copyright infringement. Before, if somebody copied your course, if somebody copied the content of your book, if somebody took your TikTok or a clip of your podcast and monetized it, you would have to sue them in federal court. You would have to find a lawyer who's admitted to federal court, get them to go to federal court in the state where you're suing the person. It would cost you $10,000 just to talk to the lawyer, to put them on retainer, to even start thinking about this. So most small businesses who created this kind of content didn't bother. But this Copyright Claims Board is virtual. So there's no need to bring on federally, and you don't need a lawyer. It's recommended you get one, but you don't need one. So particularly, you don't need the federally admitted lawyer. They're really expensive. They're a lot more expensive than the state admitted lawyers like myself. You don't have to send anybody anywhere. You don't have to pay for travel for anyone. It's just, let's sit online and we're going to see if we can come to an agreement. And if your copyright, if the material that was stolen from you, right, or used without your permission, has been registered with the Copyright Office, you get what we call statutory damages, which is a very fancy term for, the law says for every time somebody stole your stuff, you get X amount of money, period. You don't have to prove that you lost profits. You don't have to prove that they made money. It's a fine, basically, for stealing your stuff. So that's particularly useful and a good reason to go copyright your stuff.
Okay. Okay. I like this. Yes. Because I see it all the time. Like, no, I kid you not. I see it all the time. Like, big names, they have course and everything. And then I see people like duplicate that and the actual person. But change the name. Say, I'm not Amy Porterfield. I'm but have her face. And I think
there's a reason Amy Porterfield has her stuff locked down.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Because she knows what happens, and she knows how much money she's losing if somebody does that to her.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even just losing. Imagine what's her program? Digital Course Creators?
The Digital Course Academy.
Course Academy, right?
Yeah, I'm alumni.
There you go. All right. Imagine what would happen. And look, you don't have to be as big as Amy Porterfield for this to happen, but let's say somebody starts to get to know Digital Course Academy, right? And they think it's the most amazing thing since sliced bread. And let's go with you. And you think it's the most amazing thing since sliced bread. And your friend is over here complaining that they would love to create a digital course and they just don't know what to do. And you're like, oh, you should check out DCA, obviously. And some other company goes and starts a program called Digital Course Academy. And it doesn't have a 10th of the content of Amy Porterfield's. Or maybe it has 10 times as much, but it's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And you thought you were buying Amy Porterfield's DCA. Now you go find Amy Porterfield and you leave scathing reviews everywhere because you spent tons of money and you got nothing out of this. Amy Porterfield's going through her student list like, who is this person? Meanwhile, her review ratings on God knows how many websites are dropping like so fast. It's not even funny. And she doesn't really have a way to shut it down and explain that that's not my stuff. That's not my content. That's not my brand. That's not my trademark, because I didn't file for any of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, that's not the case for her. But you don't want to be in that position, right? That's a terrible position to have to be in. So there's easy things that you can do to tee yourself up if you're looking at something that you want to last, that you want to continue going on, and that you want to make sure that you've got, your foundation to be able to claim when somebody else shows up and is like, haha, this is mine. No, sir, sit down. It is not.
This is interesting. I'm learning so much. Thank you so much.
I feel like I've got a fire hose going at you with like all the legal information. I hope I'm not overwhelming you or your
No,
listeners.
no, no, no. This is actually really good because this is something
Wonderful.
that, we all, are into creating content, and a lot of my listeners are, and their majority of them are online business owners. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're creating these things, we're putting these things out there, and the thing that we avoid or don't want to listen to or try to put it on back burner
Is me.
are these things. Because I'm one of them. I'm like,
It's
oh,
me. I know.
yeah, I'm like, oh, when I get to that level, then I'll go ahead and do that. And I'm thinking that now, like, oh, when I get to that level, I'll do X, Y, Z. But now I'm thinking, I'm like, Candace, prepare for that level and then get to X, Y, Z. Like, get when,
Yep.
before you
Yep.
even get to that level. So, yeah,
Look,
that's really.
and I'm not saying when you still have like baby business and you're struggling to get folks in the door that this needs to be your first priority. If you had an unlimited budget, I wish it would. But how many of us actually have unlimited budgets? We have to prioritize what's important.
Yes.
And I can't tell you at what point your business is going to take off. You probably can't, right? Especially if you're newer, right? You're trying, you're making an effort every day, you're trying to get to that next step. But imagine how frustrating it would be if somebody stole your stuff
Mm-hmm.
and you couldn't do anything about it. Or if somebody sent you a nasty lawyer letter and you suddenly had to convince your base, your following, your audience that, oh, sorry, we're not this name anymore. We're a totally different name. I hope you guys don't get confused. I hope we don't lose business because you are confused, and there's no way we can make sure that you're not that all of you aren't at least a little confused. It's impossible.
So, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at InLine Legal. It's the handle on all of the things. You can also find us on our website at www.inlinelegal.com. If you head there, we've got a bunch of free stuff for you of like free terms to make sure you've got a limit on how much trouble your website can get into. We got a trademark quiz, a whole bunch of fun stuff over there that I think is really helpful for your listeners.
Awesome. And we'll definitely link
Yeah.
those up in the show notes. Well, Samantha, thank you so much. This has been very valuable, you coming on. So I thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I hope you had a great day.